The grandfather clock in the corner of my late grandfather's workshop struck exactly 6 in the evening when my older brother Julian told me to pack my brass files and get out. My name is Hannah Cole. I'm 31 years old, and for 8 years, I have been the only person in our coastal Massachusetts town who knew how to make the broken gears of the past tick again. I am an antiquarian horologist, someone who restores complex historic clocks and centuries-old mechanical automata. My grandfather, Arthur, taught me this craft in this very shop on the foggy harbor, showing me how a tiny, hand-carved gear can control the rhythm of an entire machine. But to my family, my work was just a dusty, eccentric hobby. Julian was 35, a high-volume day trader in New York who lived in a glass high-rise and spent money like water, until a series of bad investments wiped out his accounts and left him deeply in debt to some very unforgiving creditors. He came crawling back to our small coastal town, and within 3 days, my parents decided that the only way to save their golden boy from financial ruin was to liquidate Arthur's historic clockwork shop and sell its entire inventory to a private museum curator. My mother looked at me with cold, practical eyes and said, "Hannah, Julian's future is at stake. You can easily get a job at a watch repair kiosk in the mall. We have to sell the shop to clear his debts." I looked at my parents, then at Julian, who was smugly leaning against the counter, playing with an expensive lighter. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, packed my grandfather's hand-forged tools into my leather satchel, and walked out of the shop. They believed they had sold my future to buy Julian's salvation. They had no idea that a clock is only as valuable as the person who knows how to keep it wound. Leave a comment telling us where you are listening from, and please subscribe to Calm Drama Stories so you never miss a tale of quiet clockwork justice. The crown jewel of our shop was a legendary 1780 brass astronomical clock known as the Chronos Sphinx. Built by our ancestor, it was an incredibly complex mechanical marvel that could calculate moon phases, tides, and solar eclipses using hundreds of interlocking miniature gears. Private museum collectors had offered my grandfather over $1.5 million for it, but Arthur had always refused to sell. The only problem was that the Chronos Sphinx had been completely frozen and silent for over 50 years. Julian, desperate to secure a quick payout, had already contacted a wealthy private antiquarian curator from Boston, promising him that the famous clock was fully functional and ready for display. Julian assumed that since I loved the clock, I would secretly fix the frozen mechanism before the buyer arrived to inspect it, just to protect the family's reputation. But Julian didn't understand how gears work, and he didn't understand me. He didn't know that my grandfather had left me a leather journal containing the secret schematics of the Chronos Sphinx. The clock wasn't just broken, it was designed as a mechanical puzzle. To prevent theft, our ancestor had built a hidden locking mechanism inside the escapement wheel. The clock could only be wound and activated using a highly specialized hand-cut brass gear, the anchor escapement wheel, which served as the physical master key, and on the night I packed my tools, that tiny, priceless master gear was safely tucked inside the velvet lining of my pocket. On the day of the inspection, the Boston curator arrived at the shop, accompanied by 2 expert appraisers. My parents and Julian welcomed them with expensive wine, acting as if they were the proud keepers of a legendary legacy. Julian confidently approached the Chronos Sphinx and attempted to turn the heavy brass winding key. The gears groaned, but they didn't budge. The mechanism remained dead, frozen and silent. The curator's face darkened as his appraisers examined the gears with their loupes. "This clock is locked, Julian," the curator said, his voice sharp, And without the specialized ancestral anchor wheel to release the internal lock, this is just a beautiful, silent piece of brass worth barely $10,000. Where's the master gear? Julian panicked, his hands shaking as he tried to force the key. My sister Hannah has it, he stammered. She probably left it in her drawer. I'll go get her. He ran out of the shop and drove straight to my new location. I hadn't left town, and I hadn't gone to work at a mall kiosk. The local historical society, grateful for the decades I had spent maintaining the town's historic harbor lighthouse clock, had offered me a beautiful, wind-swept workspace inside the lighthouse keeper's cottage. I had already set up my workbenches, the air filled with the clean smell of lavender oil and brass polish, with the harbor waves crashing gently outside the windows. Julian burst through my door, out of breath and red-faced. "Hannah, you took the anchor wheel for the Chronos Sphinx," he yelled, pointing an angry finger at me. "You're ruining the sale. The buyers are at the shop right now. Give me the gear or I'll have the police arrest you for stealing family property." I didn't look up from the delicate 1890 pocket watch I was cleaning. I carefully blew a speck of dust off the balance wheel, set down my magnifying loupe, and looked at my brother. "The police won't arrest me, Julian," I said, my voice as calm as the ocean after a storm. In his personal will, Grandfather Arthur left the physical shop and the building to Mom and Dad, but he specifically left his personal toolkits, his journals, and all intellectual designs, including the master anchor wheel, solely to me. It is registered under my business name. I didn't steal anything. It is legally mine. Julian's jaw dropped. He looked around my beautiful ticking workshop, realization slowly hitting him. "Please, Hannah," he pleaded, his voice suddenly dropping into a pathetic whine. "We owe over $800,000. They will take my apartment in the city. Just give me the wheel and I'll pay you $50,000. I stood up, walked over to the lighthouse window, and looked out at the harbor. "You wanted the wealth of the shop, Julian, but you treated the work like trash. You can't have the clock without the person who knows how to make it tick." Meanwhile, my lighthouse workshop has become the most celebrated restoration studio on the coast. Collectors from all over the country bring their antique clocks to my door, and every evening as the harbor light sweeps across the water, my studio fills with the warm, comforting symphony of 100 happy clocks, all ticking in perfect harmony. I realized then that you should never let people who don't understand the machinery of your life decide your value. Your place is the rhythm you choose to live by, and the beautiful, steady ticking of the future you build with your own hands. Thank you for listening to my story on Calm Drama Stories. Comment, keep ticking below, share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe for the next story of quiet mechanical justice. The sale of the Chronos Sphinx fell through that very afternoon. Unable to prove the clock's authenticity or make it run, the Boston curator withdrew his $1 million offer, leaving my family with a silent, locked clock and a mountain of debt. My parents were forced to sell the physical clockwork shop building to a local bakery just to cover Julian's immediate creditors, and Julian had to move back into their small guest room, taking a quiet job at a local shipping office to help pay off his remaining debts. They are left with a quiet, frozen clock that stands as a silent monument to their own greed.